welcome to Season 3 of RecLess, the podcast making you smarter and more knowledgeable about the field of parks and recreation. Your hosts are Shane Mize, Jay Tryon, and Tom Venniro, three career-long friends from around the country who are joined by a surprise guest each episode. We're glad you're here. We hope you enjoy the ride. This is RecLess.
Hi, guys.
Hello, hello.
Hey.
Talking about our oldest child. She is 24 today, fellas. Can you believe that?
Wow. And he's ice skating?
Yeah, she's ice skating and going to Fogo de Chao. And I was talking about how overrated those all-you-can-eat meat places are. You'd think that's pretty controversial because, Shane likes meat, but I just want a steak. I don't want a bunch of shitty cuts coming to me all day long.
I would actually agree with you for a change.
I agree. I thought you were going to say ice skating.
It's more.
Ice skating is terribly overrated.
Quality is more important than quantity.
Yes, thank you.
When it comes to food.
Okay, mark it, Hannah. This is something we got to share.
I know.
The masses need to hear.
It's the first time all three of y'all have agreed on anything.
Okay, we're done for today.
Yeah, it's a good time to end it.
Go. Time to go.
This thing is, we can put this bitch to bed. We don't have to talk about anything else.
Oh my gosh. Well, are you guys ready?
Are we just diving in?
Listen, this girl is nervous.
We didn't get like prep questions like we have in the past.
Are you prepping us now or
Do you need prep? You guys
this
are
is all,
aren't y'all
this is all part of the cold open now. Yeah, we're ranked
I figured you guys y'all didn't need to be
150th in Parks and Rec podcast of whatever last is.
I'm in the middle of reviewing all of the NRPA sessions, and I came across ours yesterday. So I couldn't be like super biased, but obviously, well, it'll be a conversation that'll happen at the table in about a month. So we'll see.
Did the special note I put in there about, in parentheses, we have no idea what we're doing, did that make it to the reviewers table?
That was in there. There was something else in parentheses too that caught my attention. Hold on. I actually have all of them still.
Shane promises not to curse, which is a lie, but if that helps us, you can say it. Shane will be on his best behavior.
You're never on your best behavior.
I could see Tom writing that in.
Are you still looking, Jay?
Yeah, it's not showing what I pulled it up. I don't know. There was something else that I thought was funny that you wrote, but now I can't figure out what it was.
Yeah, I didn't really put the whole, we don't know what we're doing, but we don't.
That's funny. I thought you had.
Yeah. Okay. No, we're good. Sorry.
Oh, we do know what we're doing. Y'all know what you're doing. We don't?
No, you're about the only one.
We're winging it.
I'm winging it 100% too. Then we're all winging it.
She came in 30 minutes ago, like sweating, guys. She was like nervous. I was like, what are you nervous about? The four of us talk constantly about something. Like sooner or later, we're on something, talking to each other about something.
Definitely nothing to be nervous about.
Right. No, nothing at all to be nervous about. Okay. Well,
Tom will carry us. He always does.
Yeah.
He does. He does. Well, welcome to RecLess. This is a special edition today as we are wrapping up season 3. This is episode 60, which is crazy to think that we've come this far. We have this many episodes. Today, I am your host, Hannah Mize. I am the editor and producer of our little passion project podcast, RecLess, and we are so glad to have you guys here today. And to join us, obviously, Shane Mize, Tom Venniro, and Jay Tryon. Welcome, guys.
Hello. On the other side of the fence today.
That's right.
Yeah, my name is Tom. I have 2 kids, a wife, 2 kids, Amelia first and Jack.
Wow. Congrats.
I just figured an intro is necessary because I feel like I haven't talked to any of you in...
It's been a while.
It's been a while. It feels like a year, but it's been maybe 2 weeks. I don't know.
My name's Shane. I got a baby Mana named Hannah.
I saw you on a Zoom meeting 3 days ago. Come on.
That's true. We didn't really converse, though.
And Shane was not there because Shane does not get involved in extracurriculars.
That's right. I didn't even know about it. I didn't even attempt to skip it this time. I didn't even know it was happening.
But you know what?
Was it?
The Academy they still recognized him. So, I guess
Even again? What is this? Funny.
It's one
What
of the
was it?
extern groups that you probably got an invite to.
No way. No, I didn't. I don't think so.
You had to sign up to say you'd be interested in serving. So that's probably the step that was skipped.
Yep.
Yeah, I am not.
At
Thank
this
you.
point, he said no so many times they've stopped asking, I think is probably it.
Anna,
Which
where
he's
were
happy
we that
about, I'm
we had
sure.
to put our names on something and they had name tags?
The banquet?
Probably the banquet.
No, you were at the Capitol.
We were at the legislative day at the Capitol, and you were supposed to put your name down on this "Hi, my name is" sticker and walk around so the legislation could know who you are and you would know who they are when you're talking to them. And I just wrote "Nope" on my name tag. And people would come up to me and they'd start to talk and they'd be like, "Okay, no, I get it." And they'd move on. It was perfect. They were like, "This dude has literally declared he does not want to talk to anybody." And it was great.
Wow.
Yeah, people are now
Nope.
bending to your will, if you will. The nope, it's there. Well,
Took long enough.
I have really, really enjoyed our podcast and the conversations that we've had. And of course, I listen to all of it and I edit all of it. So I hear many of
We
these
hope you're
episodes
listening
multiple
to it
times.
if you're editing it, if we're honest.
It's
I
only
hope so.
sometimes. But I do listen. Anyway,
Depends on who's
one of
talking.
it depends
Yeah,
on
sure.
who's talking. Sometimes I fast forward past things. Just kidding. But as I've gone through, and I really love to listen and go back over little nuggets of things that have been said or little snippets of conversations. And along that line, I wanted to. This is y'all's question today to open us up. So, what has been the most intriguing conversation that you have had with someone, your spouse or another professional, as a result of this season, or maybe even a previous season? And if you need a moment to think, I can go through and say what mine is.
Yeah, that's normally how the host does this. Maybe
I
you're not
know,
listening to our podcast.
I do listen to it.
We normally give the other folks a second.
I know, I'm giving you a second. Okay, so here is mine. Sometimes we hear different conversation, or we think about things that we do in our own programs, and because we're doing them and it's something that comes so naturally to us, we don't think of it as being something that is groundbreaking or something that someone else might want to copy or to take advantage of or to do. And there have been two different things that I've thought have been really interesting that both people that mentioned it was like, oh yeah, of course we do this. Like, doesn't everybody do this? But it was really an interesting thing. Hillary Rummersberger was one, and when she was sharing about how they at one time were with everyone else where they were really having a hard time with recruiting and retaining lifeguards. And they just went back to the basics of lifeguarding should be fun. And they just turned it back into like the first time job that everybody wants to have, where yes, it's a big deal. Yes, you're still imprinting upon them the importance of what they do, but at the same time, they've gone back to just building a culture of it's a super fun place to work and a super fun job to have. They're not having problems with it anymore. And she was like, yeah, isn't everybody doing that?
We didn't hammer that home at the time, but we, as leaders in our departments, probably at times do, even when we're not trying to, suck the fun out of it. Like government can suck the fun out of a fun job. And we probably at times even help with that because we come in and we're like, okay, we want you to have fun, but also, this is serious and blah, blah, blah. And like, yeah, that was something that I was like, oh man, how simple that is to articulate, right? Like we just got back to having fun with our lifeguards. Our lifeguards is a fun job. Of course it's serious. Of course you're going to learn how to life save, but it's also something that a lot of us grew up doing at one time, working at camp or doing lifeguarding and just having fun in this recreational capacity, which is kind of how we all fell in love with these types of industry positions. And that was a good reframe for me.
Yeah, and there was one more as well that was another example of that same thing. Trista Taylor mentioned along the same vein about how they recruit umpires because once again that is an area that's really hard to bring in new people. It's not something that everybody wants to do, to stand there and get hollered at, or it can be a high pressure situation. And them pairing the seasoned teacher umpire with the young umpires and literally teaching them how to do it just by walking alongside them while they were doing it. Both of those things, I don't think we expounded on as much as we could have, or you guys could have whenever y'all were listening to it. But I had thought back over both of those two examples with that. So back to the original question, most intriguing conversation that you've had as a result of this season or a previous season?
So I'll go first, and it's not necessarily the most intriguing conversation, but maybe one of the most impactful conversations because it was just more of a reminder of how valuable this group of friends that we have and that others have in our industry can have with one another. So we had a conversation, and it was funny because it was kind of back to back. We had a conversation with both Cindy Sullivan and Karen Hesser, and they defined it as a tribe. We are, three co-hosts of this podcast have always called it our YPN fam. It just happened to be that, earlier that week, Nilay Bhatt was in town. Him and I got together for dinner. And then probably about 2 days after the conversation we had with Karen, I was on a phone call with John Stutzman and just texting with Michael Biedenstein. And it's kind of like this big reminder of like, man, there's so many people scattered around the country that I would never have met if it wasn't for the work that we do and the connections that we've made through conferences or different networks. And it truly is more than just a friendship. And what might have started as a conversation because we wanted to share a program idea or share how we're hiring people or share an idea for marketing grew into something so much deeper. And, that is something that I've also heard from others, obviously over the years of like the relationships they've built through different networks. And I continue to push that. And we've had these conversations probably dozens of times on different episodes. But the more listeners can hear that and try to build the same thing with others in our industry throughout the country, I think they'll see the impact too. Because, I don't think a week goes by that, one of us on this podcast don't talk to someone else from another state that we're sharing something or learning something, and it is repetitive for them as well, that we're just having that impact. We don't even realize we're having it because it's become so normal for us.
Just to add to that too, Jay, Katie, myself, and John Stutzman are workshopping a session about that exact piece of it, right? And how to maybe transition discussing that with other individuals in the field who don't really know that can exist, right? That there's a possibility that you can create so much more than just the professional side and what you can really get out of that for yourself personally and professionally. So I really do love that. I'll say that there are so many conversations that spawn from this podcast. I actually talked to Shane in text last week, and we were talking about just I think we all felt what we were going to get out of this podcast, right? And that's just some more camaraderie between the three of us, the four of us working together, and then having a really good conversation once a week, just selfishly because, hey, why not schedule a time for us to, really build into our schedule to talk, get caught up and talk with someone else like we might at a conference, but in a more private, so that's kind of I think that was our real impetus of why that's why we started this whole thing, and a lot has come with it. People are come from it. People reach out. And so I'm going to go with a gentleman named Kyle from Oklahoma. Shane, you and I met Kyle while we were in Oklahoma, and it was such a great conversation. We talked afterwards, and I feel terrible for not having the name of his counterpart or his friend, right? That was in another community in Oklahoma. And it was really interesting. Shane and I were talking, and it was like talking to the two of us on the other side of the table.
The Oklahoma version of us.
And Kyle and
What's his name, Ryan?
I believe so. That sounds about right. And Kyle was really reflective of my path and my journey and my mindset. And his friend was like just like Shane, right? Very, very similar. It was such a great conversation. And so anyway, what spawned from that, Kyle reached out to me, I don't know, a week or so after, and we had this great 3 or 4 email back and forth session discussing a lot of what we talk about here and how we've related to my journey with my organization, right? So I started in an organization when I got there. They were depleted to two full-timers and myself. And, at this point, again, it's a small agency, right? And at this point we have, eight full-timers and it's just grown, right? So what we've been able to do, and he heard that story, right? He had heard kind of a little bit in bits and pieces of where my career trajectory has been and how it's worked. And even going into how we've gotten involved with professional development, how we get ourselves to conference, and the conversations that we had were great. And just kind of to talk about where he's at and share a little bit about and also see the similarities of the situations that we're in, right? So we have that all across the country. There are people who are doing what we do. They step into a situation that's obviously not apples to apples, but probably very similar, and how we could all, help each other and pick each other's brains and see what's worked for them and see what's worked for us. And so that was a great conversation, just to have someone who's listened to the podcast, someone we met in person, and be able to kind of find parallels, in addition to the fact that it was just super funny that there was a, Kyle, which had my temperament and my mindset, and then another Shane out there, which I never thought was possible.
Right. That's right. The good looking dude that other Shane was. I have two. One's just more anecdotal. It kind of popped up as Hannah was talking a little bit. And I'll do that one first. Ryan Hegerness reached out to me last week, and Barry Dunn is watching us from afar, was very interested in what we were doing, had wished in hindsight they were able to be a little bit more involved in our meetup that we had in Atlanta. And they've reached out to see if there's going to be something like that in the future, or there's some way to work with us, which was really cool. But in that conversation that he reached out, he was talking about Ryan Davis, who he knows from revenue management school, and how great of a guy he was, how he really liked his temperament, how he connected with him as an introvert. And so that was really interesting, right? Because me and Ryan are close, and I look at him in some ways as a like-minded person as far as creativity. And it was just interesting to see that, we have this almost think of it like LinkedIn, like your connection has a connection, like it's the secondary connection. I didn't know Ryan Davis, but one of my connections did, and thought really highly of him, and talked about, and Michael even reached out on LinkedIn and said something about how cool is it that the guy that got the service award, was just on RecLess, and what a great way if you're interested in applying for that award this year, so Mike was able to leverage it. But what really connected with me, probably over the course of all the conversations we've had this season, was it goes back in some ways to what y'all were both talking about, our group. And Sarah Sandquist is someone, and we talk up our group a lot, and we have a high level of respect for everyone there. And I do hope in that conversation, Tom, that you and Katie and John ultimately potentially have with whatever audience you're in front of, that we also talk about hard conversations, and that group specifically holds each other accountable at times as well. Like, it's not all you go girls, like there are things like, hey, you got to get better at this. What are you doing here? Or whatever. And, Sarah reached out, and I've actually had multiple people reach out, and they're not critical, but they want, I think of Tiffany Johnson as well. They like this podcast. They want to see it. They want to encourage us to continue to improve and not just rest on our laurels. And we did an episode with Linda Katowski. And I think in some ways, at least I am guilty of this sometimes, that you become the hero in your own story. We have often talked about every young professional that comes in now has a benefit to the young professional network, and they don't know what it was like to not have a young professional network. And in some ways, that's absolutely a true statement. In some ways, we're probably talking from the get off our lawn perspective of, we were walking up school both ways, barefoot or whatever in the snow. And so it's like, oh, we had it so much more difficult. We had to start this network. Didn't you hear Linda's story? And Linda is this sweet, nurturing mentor who's mentored all of us and really guided all of us in one way or another in this thing. And you hear her, she's a badass. Like, she's starting, oh, you've got a blue ribbon committee? We're going to start a red ribbon committee, like we're going to go do our own thing. Like, Linda didn't knock down doors. She fucking kicked them down. And it's so easy for me to just come into the industry that she's in now, hashtag you're my Rooney, and just think, oh, it didn't exist before I got here, and I've been the only one to enrich it in some way, or look at the impact I've had, and to not think of people that we have worked with and not hear their full origin story and what Linda went through. And what was really cool was after that podcast aired, Sarah reached out to me and said, loved Linda's episode. Didn't know that about Linda. And we all know Linda really well. And she also said, in the light of seeing the episode she had heard post our conversation, that she thought we were on track, that, we were doing a good job. And so it's great to be held accountable. It's great to find that network of people to be held accountable. It's also great to be reminded that we weren't the first people that planted the flag in any one spot in this country, that people have done amazing things in this industry way before we got here. And it's cool to be reminded of that, because there are some badass people walking around this industry. And I think at this point, they're not in a leadership capacity, or they're not running the department, and we can marginalize them pretty easily. And it was a good reminder to me to not do that.
I love that. This has been a really, really great season. And this whole experience has been really, really great. As we have gone through and are wrapping up the season, I've put together some numbers, and we've had 20,798 plays so far of our podcast. And that was actually
Is
a
that a
couple
lot?
of days ago.
Is that a
It feels
lot?
like a lot. It feels
That's really
like a
cool.
lot. So over and obviously that's not counting this episode, but this is episode
Or
60.
Djibouti.
Or Djibouti. Well, craziness, right? We obviously we average about 350 plus listens per episode. And obviously the United States and Canada are our two top countries, but we have regular listeners in Djibouti and Germany that tune in every week. So it's kind of
I
cool
would watch
to
a
see.
full documentary on those people and what type of brain issues they're actually suffering from, or whatever
And
is going on.
you just said you don't want to marginalize, and you just marginalized our Djibouti and Germany fan base.
I did. My bad.
Uh,
My bad, guys.
Well,
My bad in Djibouti, so I can apologize.
I know you need your Djibouti shirt. Well, we assume a lot of times that everyone that is listening is a park professional, but that is actually not the case. As we've gone through this season, we have found that we have quite a few people that are listening that are outside of our profession. This podcast has been recommended for and has become required listening for a couple of different college courses, we've been told. And this has also become required listening for several different organizations that work with people in the field of parks and recreation. And they have used this podcast to gain a better understanding of what it is that they are creating for and what it is that they're working with. So along those lines, we've had a couple of questions that have been asked this season that if you're in the field of parks and recreation, you kind of just assume that everybody knows. But if one person has asked it, that means that there are probably others that don't know the answer to the question. So in a round robin kind of way, I'm going to pose a couple of questions and you can just kind of see who wants to take it. I've got 3 different questions, so one for each of you. So first of all, this was a question that was asked: what is the difference between park rangers at the city level versus the state level versus the national level? We've talked about park rangers quite a lot. So what is the difference of those?
Are you going to tell us who you want to answer, or are we just going to wing it? What are we doing here?
Do you want to just, I'll cut that part out.
I mean, I not to get into the 3 different levels, but I do find it interesting that depending on the agency, a park ranger will have different responsibilities and also have different levels of authority.
Yeah.
So, this is no secret. I live in Charlotte, worked for Mecklenburg County for 11, 12 years. We have park rangers, and, their responsibilities are different than what I know other rangers in different cities or counties have. So it's a trick question in a way. And, I'm going to give a little bit of a teaser because I have a guest lined up for the next season that actually works for the National Park Service.
Ooh.
So if you
You
want to
got
dive
Smokey
into,
the Bear?
hey, you'll have to tune in for season 4 if you want to hear that, because you know what? Now I'm just going to take this question to them.
Yeah.
So I'm almost like doing a cop out to Hannah's question and gonna, hey, tease it for the next season. But I will say, like, one of the main responsibilities in this structure that we had with park rangers for Mecklenburg County were ensuring all of our facilities were open and closed on time, safely, providing instruction to folks that have reservations to make sure that they needed everything they had, everything they needed, making sure all of the, shelters, restrooms, ball fields were appropriately opened and locked for them. So it was almost, I hate to use the term like concierge service, but in a way, it was making sure that they had everything they need. As someone that's visited different state parks, it's a little bit different. Their state rangers are going to be more, in my opinion, pushing the rules and the policies to make sure you're, cleaning up after yourself. Not that the municipal park rangers aren't doing that, but you're not getting as many, you're not renting ball fields in a state location like you would in a local park where the park rangers are helping you in the local parks. From the national level, like I said, I'm gonna hold that to season 4, and you guys can tune in and talk to that guest there.
Just like from the national park system to a state park system to a local park system, our roles in those capacities also change. So does a park ranger. I mean, the lexicon of a ranger just stays the same, but it really goes from some sort of enforcement, like Jay was talking about, and protection at the highest levels because they're out in acres of land by themselves. They're almost warden-like in some ways at the federal level, but then it goes more to just the ability to write tickets and enforce environmental things at the state level. And then locally, it's very much like Jay said, concierge like or outreach and education driven. My rangers can't write tickets. They're walking up to people who are doing something illegal and letting them know that it is illegal. Maybe you don't know that. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. You're going to have to put that out. But if someone says, I'm not going to put it out, they have to call the local police and the police come over and enforce whatever ordinance is. And so that wouldn't happen at the federal level. And part of the ways that wouldn't happen at the national level, because it would take 2 days for a police officer to get that far into the bush. Like they have the ability in the moment to solve whatever issues going on because the resources aren't nearly as close by or able to respond as quickly. So they're much more out like a lone ranger in some ways in their own being able to enforce and to protect and serve. And then that kind of just feathers down as it gets to the state and local level. In general, that's obviously a generalization, but that's kind of how it breaks down. I don't know if Tom agrees with that at all.
Yeah, I agree. You're different. You're going to be differentiating by size of the park, obviously, at any of those levels, right? So that's going to be a huge difference in your roles. I'll joke. I don't want to add any more to it and prolong it because I think, Jay, you are the perfect person to really answer that question with your experience with parks in general, as your personal experience. You have a lot of that. But I will add that a lot of my knowledge of parks and park attendants or rangers outside of the local municipal comes from the movie Elf. So, in Central Park, I believe they ride horses and they are keeping Santa out of the park. I mean, that's
important.
That cracks me up. Okay, next question. Ready? Agency. Why do you guys refer to everything as an agency? Is that the same as a city or a state department or just the parks department that you work with? Why do we call things an agency?
I would say to that, and I'm sure y'all have opinions as well, everything's formed differently. Like when you think of Carmel Clay, we call that an agency, but it's some sort of agreement between two cities. I think that's same with Hilton and Parma for Tom. And there are some that are a county agency. There are some that are a city agency or municipality. They're all some form of a government enterprise that is working to serve that community. But we can't call them a city, and you can't always even call them a municipality. Sometimes it's an HOA group that is running the service for that area. Like, for example, I think in some ways the Woodlands wouldn't consider themselves a city municipality as much as a township. And so agency is just that catch-all word that kind of captures any government service organization, no matter how it's formed from a national level to a really local level.
It seems to be used more when you're looking at, I guess municipalities, but at the same time, I just think it's a generic vernacular. I mean, if we talk about the privatization, right? I don't know that you would really necessarily call it an agency. It's a lot of the time you're looking at the organization or whatnot. But at the same token, at our conferences, for example, you're probably going to get some individuals. NRPA, for example, focuses on municipalities, right? I think that's a generalization that I'm making. I could be completely wrong. I don't know their membership numbers, but I'm going to guess that we have an organization or a business. I don't know what you would call it, right? We have one called Total Sports Experience, and it's a privatized turf indoor facility, right? So it's got a bunch of indoor soccer fields and some, just some other uh, physical activity, a gym, things like that, right? So even that, if you're presenting at a conference, you might say they may be in the room, the individual who's the general manager of that whatever facility business. But I think you would say you're going to take this home to your agency, right? It's just,
Yeah.
it's I think
It's
more
almost
just
like service provider or something.
Yes.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
more generalized.
The last question. The definition of Jedi, not Star Wars.
That's the Academy's term.
It is. I believe
is.
it's
Justice, equality,
equity,
equity,
diversity, inclusion.
inclusion.
Yeah, that's none of us are in the Academy.
Someone may need to fact check that, but I think we're close.
So I think this is, and I'm not counting, but I believe that was like the third or fourth time we've all agreed on something today. So this is like
crazy.
just a abnormal show from the beginning.
Bad omen.
Man, what is going on? When are we going to disagree first?
I guess
And go
that
back
means
to our roots.
episode 60 was our last.
That was it.
Yeah, we're gonna have to end it on a high note. Well, I actually I have a couple of questions for you today, and I'm going to.
What have you been doing so far?
Well, sorry. Yeah, you're right. I have what have I been doing? Well, here is a guest question that we have for today. So I'm excited for you guys to hear this. I'm going to share my computer audio.
Soundbite.
Ooh.
Okay.
Yes.
Here we go.
Can we guess who it is?
Oh, would you like to guess who it is?
I have an idea.
Ahead of time? Okay. Oh, do you want us to listen to it first?
I was going to listen first and then try to guess.
Well, I think they actually identify themselves, so that'll give it away really, really quickly. But I'm really excited about this today. We have grown to the point where we definitely have an audience, and as we're going through with these questions, these are audience questions, the ones that you just answered, the ones that are coming. So I'm excited that we have people that are reaching out. Go ahead.
Hold on.
Here is my goal for the wrap up of season 4. We need to get an audience question from Djibouti and Germany.
Oh,
We're calling if you're listening to this,
you
send us a question in, and we will be sure to answer it.
Fantastic! I love that. Okay, here we go. Question number 1.
Hey, RecLess guys.
Rooney!
I have a question for you. Would you rather watch The Office or watch Parks and Rec?
Jay Tryon is omitted from this question.
It's gonna be tough for Jay.
Jay can't even answer.
Well, he just has to answer what he'd prefer to watch, not what he's going to watch. He can have a preference.
So we got Rooney, probably our youngest listener. I could be wrong. So we already referenced her earlier. Hashtag earmuffs Rooney. So I guess if we could answer this without a profanity, that would be ideal to start.
Okay.
And so, I'll go first.
So that was targeted, by the way.
No, it's for everybody. Rooney, I really love your question. It's a fun question. I love both of those shows. They were a big part of my life at one point or another. And I think Shane and I have talked about this. I've watched both of those. I would say I've gone through the series at least twice for both of them. And then, when you might have just some downtime or a flight that you don't have anything going on, I might throw on an episode as well. So it's a real tough one. I love them both, but I'm going to lean towards Parks and Rec. And I lean towards Parks and Rec, not necessarily because it's so related to what we do, and obviously in the name that implies it, and how someone who in our profession just hasn't even saw a couple minutes of it is still
crazy,
very interesting to me, Jay. But I would say that I think when you have a series like those, you fall in love with the characters, right? And so I really, really just have an affinity for some of the characters in that show. There's just so much to really, same with The Office, you know what I mean? But when you can make some parallels to what we do and you see a Ron Swanson and just the characters of what they are, and then try to look into your own life, your own sphere, your own bubble, and you see some of these weird quirks that obviously it's an extreme exaggeration when you're watching these shows, but these kinds of personality traits, they exist. And I just love that. So, I could really find a lot of the characters in that show relatable.
I'll let Rooney be disappointed by Jay last, so I'll go next. Mike Shear worked on both, like he worked on The Office and then transitioned and created Parks and Rec, and I find both of them hilarious. I enjoy them, and like Tom said, I think I've gone through Parks and Rec 3 times. I've gone through The Office at least 3 times. I think The Office is amazing, and I think I would have to choose that one.
Set the
I
bar.
find Parks right. I find Parks and Rec funny in a lot of ways because of the things that kind of ticks back to our industry. And there's some great characters, and there's a lot of things that I connected with. But Michael Scott, the character of Michael Scott in The Office, is single-handedly one of the best characters I've ever thought has been written into like a series. It carried it so well. When he left, you could almost feel it flatten out almost immediately. And so if I only had to watch one, it would be a tough decision, but I think I would watch the early years of The Office. Yeah.
Yeah, and he came back for the finale, and it was a whole different feeling, right? It was must-see
Yeah.
TV at that point because he was back after a couple years off.
Well, I guess it would must see for one of us, but
Yeah, right. Well, before Jay goes and tells us that he would not maybe watch either of those, I have a follow-up question for you, Shane, and I would like to know, for me, obviously Ron Swanson's great, but Andy Dwyer is maybe one of my favorite characters ever, right? Like just such a fun-loving, silly dude. And there's really not much you can't love about the guy, right? Do you have a favorite character is it Ron Swanson, or what would you say your favorite? Because you have a lot of parallels with Ron to an extent.
I connect with and enjoy Ron Swanson's character, his humor. I very much like Ron Swanson. Yeah. That would be my favorite character on Parks and Rec for sure.
And then Hannah, could we find a way to pose a question back to Rooney and ask her which show she prefers?
I can definitely work on that. Yes, we'll figure out how to do that.
And earmuff Rooney, because Jay's fixing to break your heart. Go ahead, Jay. Do it.
I don't know how I would break her heart because she's just truly wanting to know which one.
And you're going to tell her neither of those elevate to anything that I even care to spend a second watching.
No, but you have to go back to the root of the question. The root of the question was, would you rather? And just for a fun fact, like, Would You Rather is probably my favorite game in the world. Like, I have a friend of mine in Charlotte that, like, whenever we get together, there's always like different Would You Rathers. And the reason why they love asking me Would You Rathers is because I like put deep thought into it. Like someone might say to me, like, would you rather, eat pizza every day for a year or never have ice cream again for a year? And like, I would literally like put a deep thought into it. So back to Rooney's question.
It's easy. It's pizza.
It's actually not an easy answer. And maybe people would think it should be an easy answer just based on the profession. And the reason why it's not is I am a Steve Carell fan. I like Steve Carell. I've enjoyed him in several movies. And I even have like certain lines that he said in movies from like 20 years ago that I'll like occasionally quote. So with that being said, based on the amount of ridicule I get from never watching Parks and Rec, I would have to choose Parks and Rec just because I probably should have watched it. It's gotten to a point where it's been like an ongoing joke now for 10 years. But if I'm sitting down and I have to do a Would You Rather and to pick one, I'm picking Parks and Rec.
Sometimes when police are negotiating with the terrorist, they feel like they can get that terrorist out. And sometimes they're just so dug in, they got to go shoot him, And Jay's in the shoot him phase. Like you're not negotiating Parks and Rec. Not even sweet 9-year-old Rooney can make Jay watch it.
I'm not saying I'm going to, but the question was, would you rather?
We're going to have to go in and shoot you. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You're dug in. We're going to have to blow the building up. He is not coming out with those hostages, folks.
So
That's
stubborn.
Funny.
Such a stubborn answer.
Well, I wonder where that comes from with you guys. So question number 2 comes from a different listener that has reached out to you guys.
Hey guys, love the podcast. I have a background in recreation therapy. Recently, I started helping parks and rec agencies implement maintenance management software at productive parks. So I was curious, are you seeing any trends or developments with your park maintenance or park ops departments? Things like new technology, equipment, or ways of doing things?
I should have introduced that. He has a different question where he said his name first. It's Kevin Gruzewski.
I think to answer Kevin's question, first of all, there is some really cool technology going on. And in a couple different ways in the park ops side. Obviously, the those mobile tanks that are painting things and everything's being aligned by GIS software now. That's really a game changer for a lot of agencies. I'm starting to see a lot of cool stuff on the lighting side, the solar side, where you can get lights in places that you would have a tough time getting electrical to in the past, and they can even align with like dark sky initiatives where the hues can be colored down and they can only be motion censored and they can have an animal light gradient to them. So when they're not lighting the path for like a human being, they can light them in a much warmer thing so it doesn't impact animals. I think all those types of technologies we're seeing are very cool. On our end, you're starting to see the expectation that if a municipality has a Parks and Rec facility, it should look like a AAA's Parks and Rec facility, or even a college, local college, or even, potential sports team facility. Even if it's not look like that 100% in maintenance and design, like when you're building a ball field now, they want the ball field, they want those kids to feel like they're at the Little League World Series or they're playing in their element, their moment. And so we're designing facilities and even maintaining facilities that aren't like the ones Jay was in Jay's backyard back in the day, right? Like, when we all think of what a Little League baseball field looked like when we were growing up, it was a volunteer organized, dads are out there mowing things and, it looked like there were service days out there and it looked very much like just a sandlot path in some ways. And maybe with some fencing and some areas that, you had the bullpens or whatever. And now these things are incredible. They're little World Series type stadiums. They're little facilities, whether it's a football field or a baseball field or a softball field or a soccer field. I mean, the folks that manage Round Rock Express's AAA baseball team also do our fields now. That's not because I wanted to raise the quality of our fields to the same that they see when they go and pay for a game. It's because the industry, the community wants that experience for their kids. And so I think that's something we're all starting to see is like, we are recreation, but we're recreation in service only, not in the expectation or how we serve compared to someone else. Like, you've got to put out the best facilities out there. You're getting that pressure from outside agencies around you and the community inside.
Yeah, that ties into economic impact, Shane, too. And if you have the ability to do this, whether it's a resource like the individuals you just mentioned or your internal forces, ultimately, I feel like you see this almost competitiveness in recreation, right? Or parks and recreation, where we want the tournament here. We want it here. We don't want them. There's groups out there. I believe it's, your Visit Rochester or Visit Austin, right? And these individuals will go out and bid facilities, right? And they will, it's just like, the PGA bidding out the US Open, right? Like they're going to go out and bid these cities. Well, that happens at our level as well. And so just to take your quality of what you're putting out there, and it's not just the neighborhood park anymore that, the dads or the moms and they're maintaining, right? It is a high level because you want to see these individuals, you want to bring them to your community every time. There's an economic impact piece to that. That ties into what I'm surprised you didn't mention because you have the most experience with it, but Placer AI, using that as an ability to track and understand when our parks should be open, when we might have to have it staffed more because there's more individuals. And those are great resources. There's others out there that I feel are pretty interesting as well. I think a lot of people are probably using technology to schedule, maintenance, work orders, inspections, things like that. That's probably been happening for a while, but there's also tools and resources out there for individuals to self-report. So our staff is going to inspect playgrounds, right? And okay, we all say that, and there should be something in place for that, but they can't see everything. They can't see every beehive or missing bolt, right? And so there's technology out there now that we're starting to use where individuals now have the ability to scan a QR code and say, hey, here's a picture of your playground. It's missing this, right? And now all of a sudden, the individuals, the user, it's kind of put on them. It's a user experience to help us maintain our facilities. Last one I'll mention that has just recently been brought to my attention by a group called rec.us. And I think USTA also brought it to me a while ago, or in a conversation that I had in a meeting. But there's a little bit of a push for software out there for reservation of facilities. So, the old style is I have to call so and so agency, or I have to put a request in online, or whatever it is, and then it has to be approved and all that. There's softwares out there now, and individuals or agencies that are administering these, where individuals can go out and just say, okay, there's 10 spots or 10 spaces or 10 time slots to rent this pickleball court out, or this tennis court. And they're able to do that on their own, taking, and again, that goes into the conversation. Are we necessarily taking jobs away? No, we don't have to. It's just going to make the individuals that we have doing jobs more efficient and free them up to do other jobs.
Yeah, I want to add like a totally different swing on this conversation. I was actually in a meeting on Wednesday with a group of individuals that are leading the charge with a initiative for audio orienteering. And what we're doing is we're actually, and it's already been done here in Charlotte, but I'm doing it in some of our trails. And the gentleman, Tom, I'll have to connect with you. The gentleman that led this conversation is based out of New York. His hometown is Albany. He's done stuff in Syracuse. He's done stuff in Rochester. But ultimately, what we're going to be doing is identifying trails in our parks, and it's for the visually impaired to be able to have an audio course to walk a trail and learn about that trail. So folks that have visual impairment that may not be able to know that, when you're walking a trail on the right, there's a historical site. It'll tell you some history about it by listening to an app. So there is an app, it's Microsoft Soundscape, that can actually, you can record what you want someone to hear on a trail. For those that may not have the ability to see everything that you want them to see on a trail. So it's really incredible. We were part of a grant through Gatorade that we're going to be, steering this project with a couple other agencies here in North Carolina. So I look forward to learning about it more. Wednesday was our kickoff meeting, so I'm still learning about it. But the technology that's out there is pretty incredible. And knowing that you can just literally drop your trail, your park within GIS and add some pinpoints to it with an app, and then, create highlights that you want people to learn about through audio tunes and different speeches and different points of interest. It's really something that'll set us apart, and I believe others are going to jump on this as soon as they hear about it.
Super cool. And Kevin Grzuski is also a listener that has reached out. He's in the Midwest, and he listens to us as he's walking his dog usually. So Kevin, thanks for listening. We're super glad that we're reaching out to other listeners. All right, ready for the next question?
Let's do it.
Hey, RecLess crew, it's Trista Taylor. What is something you each do to step out of your comfort zones and foster lifelong learning? This can be personally, professionally, or both.
I didn't have my answer yet. I just feel like I have an answer for you, Shane. I would like you to just really enjoy and embrace when we're in Orlando, because there is definitely some learning to be done in Disney, and I can't wait to. You have to get to a park. Anyway, go ahead. You can answer, but I want to get you out of your comfort zone when we're in Orlando.
Yeah, I bet you do. I think I probably more than y'all try to stay in my comfort zone. Like that's probably my problem. Like if there's a group of people I don't want to talk to, I just don't go talk to them. And y'all are really good at saying, I'm going to go over there and talk to those people. And so I think in some ways this podcast or even speaking has done that for me. I'm obviously speaking more now because of all three of y'all, actually, because both of y'all have encouraged me for years to speak more. And I've always tried to speak when y'all ask me to speak, but I've always been very easy to tell most other people no if they ask me to speak at a presentation or conference. And Hannah has encouraged me to just say, people need your perspective. And if they're not getting it from you, they may not get it. And so I've been trying. What I've learned in some ways is something I knew earlier in my career or when I was playing sports or whatever. And that is, if you're hurt, you just have to play hurt. And if you're tired, you have to play tired. If you don't want to practice that day, you still have to practice. I had gotten into a thing where if I didn't want to do something, I just was like, fuck it, I'm not going to do it. # Rooney earmuffs. I would just decide, I wasn't going to do that thing. I'm not going to speak at a conference, or I'm not going to dress up, or I'm not going to do whatever I didn't want to do. And there is learning again in the mindset of if you have to go speak, but you don't feel like speaking, you still do it, or if you're nervous about speaking or you're worried how this presentation is going to go, you still do the presentation, or whether it's at a conference or with a group of people that are in your agency or community or a podcast. And so I would think that is how I'm best trying to get out of my comfort zone more is stepping up when asked to do things.
I think for me, it's not necessarily like I don't have a comfort zone challenge, but from a learning perspective, I am an oddity in the fact that I don't think most people like truly enjoy like going to their council meetings, and I do. I know there are evening meetings that like a lot of folks don't want to go to because it takes them away from their family, and which I don't love that aspect of it, but I enjoy learning how city government operates and learning about other departments. And I've always have been that way for a little while. And I think what I've done even in the last year or two, even more, is when I'm sitting at a city council meeting and I'm hearing about a project that has nothing to do with Park and Rec. It's very easy to just like tune out of it and just think about, what I want to do tomorrow or what I'm doing over the weekend. But I'm like usually taking notes on like different aspects of that project and learning about that agency's department and how they differ from Park and Rec, and then thinking about how we as a department in Park and Rec can maybe benefit from that project or get involved with that department, or is there a way that we're not involved that would benefit us and benefit them? So I would say my learning component is trying to figure out ways that when I'm sitting in meetings that are not always relevant in Park and Rec, like how we can become relevant and improve not just our department, but improve the city I work for. So I'm learning a lot about by doing this, I'm learning other departments and how they operate and what, makes them successful. And, I'm not scared. And maybe this is the comfort zone part of it is I may be sitting at a department head meeting with 20 different department heads, and there's a topic that comes up that has nothing to do with Park and Rec, but sharing something that I think would help them grow or help them like achieve their goals that they're trying to set in our strategic plan. And they may look at me and be like, well, how do you know about that? You work in Park and Rec. But by sitting in like in these other meetings and taking notes and trying to like really think about how I would take their approach to things and improve things, like I give my 2 cents and just I'm constantly learning about just how cities can operate more effectively.
That's why you'll be a city manager and I won't, because I don't give a flip about the other departments are doing.
It's weird. Like maybe I shouldn't care about our planning department or engineering department, but I do because I want us to all like be more effective and work together. So like if I can share some insight on something that they're doing and like maybe they don't take the advice, maybe they do, but it at least will build a relationship that when we do need each other, like I built that relationship.
Yeah, definitely in the middle of both of you on that. I don't, not that this is the answer, but I just wanted to add to that. I don't love hearing about what the other departments are doing. I really don't. Some of it is interesting, but a lot of it, you just kind of sit there and I'm like, gee, this is going on for a while. Just like when I'm talking, I'm sure people think the same thing. However, my point being, I also believe in culture, Jay. So I like to go to your side of it and say that as I'm associated with this organization. So what these
Yeah.
other departments are doing it's important. So for me, I would agree with Jay. Just to get back to Trista's original question, I don't have a huge comfort zone issue, so to speak. I maybe used to, and I think that for some of it, it was overcoming the fear of really getting up in front of people and doing this. But I've was able to, for whatever reason, really embrace that and now enjoy it so much that it's not, and of course, to add to that, maybe someone wants to hear how did I learn or teach myself to do it, and it exactly goes to the learning piece of it. It was by studying individuals at conferences. I love to be a student of individuals who are presenting. I'm fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by, and that's where a lot of my style. I'm my own person, but style wise, if I go to a Ryan Hegrenus session, there's a lot to take from a Ryan Hegrenus session, and I'm not Ryan, but there's a lot of what he does, or a Nile Bot, or, a Bobby Nance, right? These individuals. So for those out there who have a fear of either public speaking or presenting or sharing, use the conferences as the learning aspect, as opposed to just being or just taking notes or whatever it is you do to learn at a conference. I used to put little stars in my notes saying, okay, implement this at orientation, implement this for youth sports, right? I've transitioned that to saying, in addition to doing that, I'm putting notes in there saying, okay, how can I now use this technique in my presentations? So I'm not just listening or learning for the content. This is more a specific lens for those of you out there who are trying to overcome that fear of maybe presenting and putting yourself out there is become a student of the individuals who do it so well, and it will help you out.
Love all great answers. And thank you to Trista Taylor, super fan of ours who reached out, but also a former guest of the show. So, and Rooney is Trista's daughter, and they listen on the way to school in the morning. So we're glad to have both of them.
Rebecca and Esther. Yeah, we have to
Rebecca and
explain
Esther.
RecLess. Right.
Yes. Next question.
Because we get in a lot of trouble for just assuming people know things. Sorry.
Hey, it's Esther here with a question for you guys. If you could pick just one leadership or professional development book that you feel is relevant to the field, what would it be and why?
That's hilarious.
But wait,
Speaking of Esther,
what about Becca? I got in trouble for not including one once.
You almost got me in trouble.
and for our listeners out there, Esther and Becca are my sisters who also listen to the podcast and are constantly questioning Shane about everything that is said on the podcast. So back to the question. Leadership books. Shane's very favorite.
I like a leadership book. That's about all I read. I would have to say for me, the most impactful leadership book I read was Daniel Pink's Drive. That was early in my career, a good first book for me. It talked about, it can't just be about, you have someone making $15 an hour, you pay them $16 an hour, they just all of a sudden start doing a better job. No, there's a threshold that you have to get them to financially where they're not worrying about their bills or thinking, oh, man, I got to do a second job to offset what I'm not making from this job. So there's a threshold financially everyone has to be at. But then after that, there is autonomy and other responsibilities that they will cling to as something that will give them the drive to do what you need them to do. I thought it was an incredible book and is still one of my favorites. And so Drive was a great book for me, leadership wise. It really kicked off the journey of me being a reader. I'm not much of a reader as far as I don't read the fiction books. I have no interest in them. And so because I didn't have an interest in fiction books, and when you're 8, 9, and 10, you don't have an interest in leadership books. I wasn't much of a reader growing up. I would read a book from time to time about a biography of someone, like a coach or something I was interested in, read their story. I enjoyed that a lot. And what that was probably preparing me for were those leadership books, because you would see the moments where they learned to lead and grew as a person and as a coach. And so that was probably the early days of my interest in that. But Daniel Pink's Drive was pretty pivotal in me saying, okay, now I get it. And I need to read more books like this to continue to foster who I am as a leader.
I want to go and maybe talk a little bit towards, we've talked about this on the podcast a lot. I think I've had this conversation with Jay probably more than anybody, and that's about our why. And so there's a book, Start With Your Why by Simon Sinek, and that was introduced to me actually by Ryan Hegredus. Another great little, I don't know if Ryan had some kind of deal with Simon, but he's again, great presenter, something that stuck with me. He brought X amount of copies of the book, and he's like, come and see me after if you want a copy. So went up there. Obviously, I knew Ryan at the time, but grabbed one of those. And I've really always subscribed to the method, to the model of what is our why, and why is that so important? So for leadership purposes, that book really kind of focuses and has helped me hone in on discovering or establishing the reason that I do what I do, not just necessarily professionally, but also personally, and then harnessing that to try to inspire others, right? Because that's what we have to do as leaders. You have to you have to inspire people, the people around you, right? They have to, for a lack of a better way to say it, buy in. You can't get everybody to buy in, but it's important to have some help when you're looking to inspire someone on anything that you believe in or that you need to get accomplished as a team.
So I am similar to Shane, where I don't do a ton of reading, but the first book that came to mind when you asked this question, I went through a leadership program in Mecklenburg County, and we always had guest speakers that came throughout this program. And one of the guest speakers was a prior president to a local college here, and his name was Dr. Tony Zeiss. And he wrote a book called How to Build Your Own Ladder. And it was all about just, career aspirations and how to make your career aspirations come true. That's the first thing that came to mind. And it was something I read probably 10 to 15 years ago. and it still is something I've thought of. I have it on my shelf in my office. So, How to Build Your Own Ladder by Dr. Tony Zeiss, and I'm sure it's available on Amazon if people are interested in finding it.
That sounds like a great one too, and it reminded me of another one that was like kind of a fun one, the Energy Bus. If anybody, it really falls in line with all of that. And the other piece, if you're not much of a reader, is utilize TikTok or YouTube, look up TED Talks. Simon Sinek. You can find a lot of that. Just really great clips, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 12-minute TED Talk, but a little quicker way to maybe try to get to the core of what you're looking for and potentially finding some great leadership tips.
Okay, so not to be left out. Here we go.
Hi, this is Becca Grace, a longtime listener and fan of the show. As an ordinary citizen, non-agency representative, as they say, what are beneficial ways for regular people to engage with the Parks and Rec Department in their cities outside of attending events?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's a good question. First of all, Becca Grace is I noticed Grace, and it's Grace's birthday, correct, today?
It is,
So
yeah. There's a lot of happy birthday to our oldest.
is that where the name comes from?
No. Becca married a gentleman with the last name Grace.
Oh, I thought okay. I just thought maybe Becca was her
middle name or her full name.
First middle. Some people will go with the first middle.
Yes,
right.
we are in the South.
And
we do.
Yeah, we are.
I made an assumption. Okay. All right. Okay.
It's a fair assumption.
Uncle Graham screwing all this up for us. Yep. It's Grace.
So I'll kick this one off for Becca Grace last name, and just there most agencies, and I love how she used, as you say, in the business agencies. Most of our agencies, and I'll never say agency without thinking of this, but we all have maybe a commission or a rec committee. So that's a first starting point. Look in your local municipality and see if they have any kind of a rec commission or committee on the books. And you could absolutely look to join those if there are vacancies. Also, just simply if I don't, again, not knowing exactly what she meant by getting involved other than being someone who attends events and programs, we're always looking for volunteers. And, just reach out. That's what I would advise. I wish more people did that for us. We had an individual who's recently done this. His name is Richard Harris. He's been a patron of ours for probably as long as I've been here, because he's been in the air for a while. And he just recently started reaching out saying, I'd love to give back. I want to be a part of it. And he is phenomenal. I wish we could hire 10 Richards. You know what I mean? And either way, one of to build onto that volunteerism, one of the sessions I went to at the NRPA conference in Atlanta was about a strong volunteer program at events. So the reason I say that is, and this agency, there it is again, they did a phenomenal job of engaging their volunteers based on what they want to do. So the reason I say that is if you like youth sports or sports, you probably could volunteer specifically or solely for sports. If you want to work with seniors, you could probably only volunteer with seniors based on your schedule. We have someone that calls bingo every week and she loves it, right? Similarly, if you love being around people and you love the events, there are agencies out there that have event volunteer groups, and there are just so many ways to get engaged as a volunteer in general. And there's obviously more. I'm really curious to hear what Jay and Shane have to say.
Yeah, Tom, those are great. And I think there's always going to be volunteer needs in every department around the country. But the first thing I thought of was just feedback. I mean, there is always opportunities for us to get more feedback on programs, events, parks, trails, what we're doing right and wrong. And too often, we get the emails that say, hey, this was not open on time, or there was trash, or the bathrooms were dirty. And those are great. Like, we need to hear that. But are you going to a park and you're enjoying it? Like, shoot an email, fill out a survey to let them know that too, because those are the things that are going to help motivate the staff continue to do a great job, because they're not always getting that pat on the back that they do deserve. And it's tough when you have a large agency or small agency and there's so many things to manage every single day that we don't get as much recognition to everyone that deserves it. And I would really hope and think that most agencies do have some sort of survey set up somewhere on their website, or even just an email to be able to give some feedback. So if you can't find a survey, just shoot an email to, there's usually a generic Park and Rec email, or at least you can find a informational email that's on the website. Whether you're at a park and you just want to share something you really like about it or share an idea. Maybe you want to actually expand and see, hey, is there any opportunity for you to add a basketball court to this park or add this amenity or this feature? The more engagement that we can get as professionals, the more we can make sure we meet the residents' needs, as well as, everything Tom said was great, but any feedback, additional information you can share if you're a user is phenomenal.
Yeah, Becca, just make sure if you're going to share that feedback, it gets to the right person because as I've been told in Pflugerville, if you send it to the wrong person, you will not get an answer. It will fall on deaf ears. I think Jay can attest to this.
And you may think you sent it to the right person because I've actually sent it several things to the right people, but they still didn't respond.
Yeah, I was talking about Shane. Were you?
Yeah.
Okay.
And my staff. So that's what I was worried about with this question is I don't want to teach anyone how to get a hold of me in any way. I'm fine with them just enjoying our parks and shutting the hell up.
But I do think you're right. Comfort zone in his own little world.
That's right. I do think commissions are a great way to get involved. I think there's also volunteer opportunities like commissions, but people don't realize them as much, like a bond steering committee, or sometimes we'll gather a committee to help us with the program draft of a rec center. A lot of those are appointed by council. So I think in some ways getting to know your local council member or council members and letting them know that when Parks and Rec has an opening, whether it's on a commission or a steering committee or something, please have them consider them as someone that they would appoint. I think that's probably a great way to get plugged in. I would hate to admit it, but I think in a lot of ways, if you're engaging the director, you have an issue. Like Jay said, that something didn't open on time, something was disappointing in one way or another. And I do meet with those people. I do bring them in my office and I talk to them and I try to right any wrongs that we have done. And usually I would say almost 100% of the time, I end up having a good relationship with them afterwards, where I can see them out in the community and say, hey, how's it going? Where lifeguard lessons are going better, right? Yeah, everyone's still good. You're happy, cool. And so in some ways, just reaching out to the director and saying you're a citizen that would like some time. I think most directors, even myself, would probably give you some time that we can talk. And so, but don't do it. Just don't.
Janet Bartnick and Chris Noons subscribe to a terminology that is 100 cups of coffee. And to that point, Shane, of just if you wanted 5 minutes with someone, invite that individual out to coffee. I'd just love to talk to you about what's going on in the community. And I think to at least my point, I would absolutely and gladly accept that. Might even buy the coffee too.
Yeah, look at you. We'll see. I hope more people ask you.
I've enjoyed all these listener questions. We have one last listener question.
Hey guys, I love the podcast. Currently, I help parks and recreation agencies implement maintenance management software with productive parks, but I have a background in recreation therapy. So I was wondering, if you had the staff and resources to add a recreation therapy department to your agencies, what programming or goals would you like to see come from that department?
And that last question was also from Kevin Grzyski.
Yeah, Kevin, it's a good question. And we've talked a lot about it from a perspective with some of our guests who maybe work for a specialized therapeutic rec agency who then ultimately serves our departments and provides those because maybe we just don't have those resources. So yeah, you're exactly right. A lot of us probably don't have our own branch for therapeutic rec. And if I did, I would really want to see the efforts and really the focus go directly towards programming that we're not obviously hitting on, first of all. So where are we not hitting? In some of the recent conversations that I've had with, we're trying to get better, right? Because we don't have that specialist, but we'd want to be able to have our own basically program, not a program catalog or guide, but another set of offerings that really focus on it and not just maybe sprinkling it in here and there. I was talking about an event with Ryan Rockefeller, our assistant director, and we were talking about fireworks versus drones, right? And why drone shows. And so fireworks are, tried and true. Everybody loves fireworks, right? Wrong. Not everybody loves fireworks. Pets don't like fireworks. Individuals with military vets, individuals with just there's people out there with sensory issues with loud noises, and then we have to disrupt that with our fireworks, right? And so what can you do? A drone show is silent, or maybe you have an event that runs 5 or 6 hours, the first hour is a sensory hour. It's specifically geared towards individuals who loud noises are not great, right? So you don't have a band playing at that time. You whatever it could be. So for us, it would be someone to come in and really hit a home run, like knock that into our programming and not make it an afterthought, to be honest, because that's sadly at times we're focused on what we know and clearly not knowing or having the training or knowledge or background, we're hearing about these things maybe after the fact and then implementing them. So being in front of it would be helpful.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Tom in some ways. If I had one program that needed a staff member, whether it was therapeutic rec or not, I'd probably hire a specialist in that thing or even a contractor to handle that thing. I think if I'm able to get a therapeutic rec person on staff, and that's something we're working towards as well, I'm going to do what I do with all my other staff, but just tell them, to me, this is what excellence looks like, right? My expectation of where what we need to be offering, the range, the diversity of what we need to be offering, the age range and everything, and then get the hell out of their way. As the professionals in those spaces, tell me what we need to do, come back to me and say, this is the budget need, this is the facility I need, or the time I need these facilities, and let me go work on making sure you can have those things, because I don't want to hire really good people and tell them what to do. And I'm afraid if I did, I wouldn't be the authority, right? So I think if I could just look at my department and say, oh my gosh, we're killing it, but we just need therapeutic rec for camp, I would just hire a camp specialist or a contractor that would help us. I think my preference would be a hire rec therapist of some level and say, look at this from a programming perspective, like Tom said. Also look at it from a facility perspective. What's our facilities look like right now? Our future facilities, like here's the plans for the next park. Are we hitting the mark? And just lean into their expertise.
Yeah, I actually want to go back to something that was said earlier about how when you were sharing some numbers, we have a lot of listeners that might be listening that aren't in the profession. And I would hope that some of these folks are in close-knit communities that are similar to Park and Rec, that might be in the nonprofit world or, in special districts that are assisting in different areas of TR. And that's where I would want to take that direction of this question to go, as an agency that doesn't have a TR department or TR staff, we need to do a better job partnering with these organizations. So I would encourage other listeners that do not have that is to identify other organizations in your community or surrounding communities that you could partner with so you could offer these programs. And it kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier with the audio orienteering program that we're going to kick off. That is a partnership with both another agency as well as a large grant that we were a part of to provide this throughout North Carolina as a whole, not something just here in Concord, but that we're going to tap into a larger market. So we're not always going to have the resources to provide that type of program or to hire that staff, but there are a lot of organizations that would be interested in partnering. So just another avenue for us to discuss with our teams as we look at expanding what we offer.
All fantastic answers. We say a huge thank you to all of our listeners that have reached out over the last couple of seasons, and especially this season, as they've reached out with questions and have communicated with us in various ways. So we appreciate the feedback and we love hearing from you guys. So thank you so much for that.
Hannah, I got a question just for our knowledge. How did you, without our knowledge, reach out to potentially guests that you've never met before and get them? How did you do that?
You've opened the floodgates, because now people are just going to start emailing us random crap that I'm just going to go delete.
But I checked the email, so it wasn't done via email.
Yeah, and it wasn't done via social, right?
It was not. No,
could have been Instagram or something, I guess.
No, actually, I didn't. So I reached out to each of these different individuals. I looked at, they had either reached out to us or had left comments or had left questions in our socials. And then I went and found those different individuals and tracked down email addresses and for questions and told them that they would be featured on our show if they sent in a question. So yeah, it was quite fun. I actually had a really good time sneaking around and compiling questions for our show. So hopefully everybody enjoyed a different perspective.
I love my sister-in-laws, but more Rooney. How do we get more Rooney in our lives?
This show is predicated on sneakiness. Really? Literally, yes. That is what this whole premise of what we do. So if anybody needs a sleuth out there, you got four of us ready to go.
That's right.
It's quite fun. Actually, I told Trista that our whole entire premise is based on a web of lies and deceit, as we're all constantly keeping secrets from each other. So it's quite fun. Okay, so let's make this a little lighthearted and go super quick because you guys have agreed with each other a lot, and it feels weird.
It's interesting today.
Me.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so in the vein of Jay's very favorite game, would you rather? We'll just
I was
do
about to
real
say, why
quick.
have we not played any Would You Rather if that was
I
Jay's
know.
favorite game?
How quick
I
can we
don't-
be? Let's see.
Oh,
Let's
we'd
try
be
to.
terrible.
We've tried
Needs to
time
be-
limits before, but didn't
I
work.
know.
Mr. Tommy
Would you
Two Answer over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guilty.
He's going to give us a dissertation on it. All right. Would you rather bike or skateboard?
Bike.
Is it an electric skateboard or a manually operated skateboard?
Your
Is
choice.
it
I
an
don't
e-bike
know.
or a regular bike?
Also your choice. I don't know.
If it's one of Shane's electric skateboards, I'll take it. Those are always a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah, one
elaborate.
of them's giving you some fits.
I'm gonna elaborate. I just let you all know I own a bike. I've done bike races. I've fallen off of skateboard. So that's why.
Skateboards. Give me skateboards.
Would you rather chicken or beef?
Beef.
Chicken.
Bake.
We know what Shane's are. All right,
Can
you
I say
ready?
fish?
Well, you know what? I
Gross.
didn't even put that one
That's
in
a
there.
vegetable.
Fish.
Because fish is
Don't
definitely my first choice.
We love that. See, once again, I figured we would find something that you guys would not agree on. All right, would you rather shorts or pants?
I've been wearing more pants lately.
I'm a pants guy. I think pants for me.
I'm in shorts when I get home from work,
I've
even
been
in the
wearing
cold.
pants at the house.
No, Shane used to be shorts guy all the time.
It's bird legs. I gotta hide them now.
All right, would you rather lake or beach?
Lake. Beaches suck.
I agree with that statement. If I had to, lake, but I'm not a water. Neither. So if I had to choose, lake.
Neither.
But I'm more of a land. I like land. Stay away from water. I don't trust what's underneath it, and yeah, I can do without it.
Oh, that's funny.
I'm going to take beach because there's a lot more to do in the water when you have waves and sand and all the good stuff.
Like get eaten by a shark, stung by a jellyfish.
Jellyfish.
Hey, there's a lot
that's so
more
funny.
things that you don't realize that are in the lake that are just very harmful that can do just as much damage.
Yeah, like the Loch Ness
Is
monster.
there
No,
really?
I mean, the water is much cleaner in an ocean than it is in a lake.
Not Galveston, according to Charles Barkley.
What about Lake Pflugerville? How's that water?
Oh, that's pristine, brother.
Crystal clear.
Pristine. That's right.
All right, last one. Would you rather ice cream or cake?
Ice cream. I'm not a dessert guy, but ice cream for sure.
I'm having ice cream cake.
Good answer.
And I'm having cake. There's just so much more you can do with cake.
Bacon cake. Shane's having a bacon cake with
That's right.
eggs.
A la mode,
we-
right, Hannah?
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
You gonna tell
True
that
story.
We went to we were very first married. We're at a
It's
a
called a
little
honeymoon.
restaurant. It was a honeymoon. Yeah, we were on our honeymoon. You're right. Very first married. Shane ordered pie. And she goes, "Sweetie, you want that a la mode?" He goes, "No, I just want it with ice cream." She goes, "Right, a la mode." He goes, "No, just bring me just ice cream." Anyway, it was quite funny.
I didn't know with ice cream was a la mode and whatever fucking French restaurant we were supposed to be eating at. I guess.
I wouldn't have known
We
that
were
either.
in a diner.
Hashtag get mushroomy.
Well, I was going to say, so we bought a nice fancy cake to have for dessert for Christmas, and we only ate like half of it. So I have it in the freezer, and it's typically like a routine right now that I'll take a piece of the cake, throw in the microwave, and then it gets like nice and warm, and then I'll put ice cream on top of it. So I literally have both on a regular occasion. So
Sounds
sorry
delicious.
to not answer your question.
That's okay. That's okay. All right. So last question, because we've had
I
a
thought
we've had a
last
great
question was the
episode.
last question.
Okay,
That was
well,
the last
this-
rapid fire question.
That was the last rapid fire question. You know what? It's
We
hard
weren't even
sitting over here
rapid
on this side.
firing.
I'm
We're
not an
would
Would you
you rather.
expert.
rather? Would you rather?
We were would you rather rapid firing. Okay, so
Gotcha.
this is the last
You can
question of
just
our
mute
show.
him.
I should just I actually think he's still the host. But anyway, we enjoyed so much going back over all of our season 3, and I don't know if you want to add anything, maybe that was your very favorite thing of this season, or maybe if you have one takeaway that was really great part of this season or something that you really stuck out to you. And also along those same lines, I'm going to throw in a second question. Takeaway from this season, maybe a favorite episode, and what do you hope to see in the future?
All right, so I'm gonna go with a takeaway. I prepared a little bit for today. Didn't know what the questions were gonna be because Hannah didn't give us those this time. So we
Right. Falling down on the
That's
apparently
how the
job.
show goes.
it is
That's
how
what we're
the show
supposed
goes.
to do. You
So
don't ever prep anybody else either.
you're right. You're right. Very true. So for me, I wrote down some quotes because I always love that question. What do I take away? What are quotes that I remember? And so I wrote down a few, and I'll share them that could kind of go into my favorite episode takeaways answer. And Karen Hesser, Parks are People. I loved that, right? And she also mentioned it starts with parks, which is, I think, a really great message. This was the first season that we really, at least that I could recall. I know we had Kathy Capps, who works for North Carolina State Parks, but we've talked a lot of park ops this season, and we've had Nathan Fort too. So either way, we really did some good focusing with parks and got really into that this time around. And then another one that I wrote down here was from Jason Mangum. And that was a great conversation. I really love talking about the disaster preparedness. It's not a lot of us don't have to worry about that, thankfully, but there's a lot of lessons to take. But either way, he also talked about being great. And Shane, you obviously worked with him. You understand this firsthand. And the quote that I wrote down was become unsatisfied with the status quo. And I love it. And it's something that I think about on a regular basis now and have shared with individuals. The other piece that I will say in terms of a takeaway is I really enjoyed that we also got into some Disney talk with a lot of our guests this time. So shout out to Tony Lopez and Ashley Falcon for indulging and bringing a little bit of our worlds into our listeners, Jay, Hannah, and Shane's. And for the future, I'm just looking forward to continuing what we're doing, obviously, but also breaking outside of the mold and bringing more diverse, unique parallels of what we do to our listeners. I'm excited for a few of our guests. I think this is going to be a season
Only
of
a few of them.
a few of
You're
them.
bringing
A
on
few
some
of
people you're not excited about, huh?
Why do you always got to do that? It's going to be a season of surprises. All right, you're going to be. We're all going to be, I think, blown away with some of the individuals that we're going to speak with this time around.
Well, I'm not going to pick a favorite, but there were several guests that we had this year that prior to the podcast, I did not know them at all. So Tom just mentioned Ashley's name. I did not know Ashley. I would also say the same thing with Javi Martinez that was on, and I know he was mine, but I saw his name on a few different things, and I wanted to reach out to him. But I learned a lot about some of our, and I hate to use the term like up and coming professionals, but all of these two people I just mentioned were being recognized for what they're doing in our profession, and they are on the YPN spectrum. And it was really exciting to me to see how their forward thinking has made an impact in their community, but also on a nationwide level because they're doing things not just locally, but also nationally. So that was really exciting to me. And then one thing I'm looking forward to in the next season is, I think I said this last year too, or last wrap up, is diving into some new topics that, areas we've never talked about. And I know I've already kind of like spilled the beans earlier, but I already locked in a guest from like the National Park Service. So just going in a different direction with some of our guests that will expand the true impact that we have as an industry, but also like bringing the industry together from different perspectives that we haven't talked about.
Agree. Love it.
I agree with Jay on how many new people I got to be exposed to this year. I mean, season 1, I'd heard of the name Joe Geller. I'd never actually talked to her. But other than that, I knew every name of season 1. And really, other than Dan Mason, I think I knew every name of season 2. Like you either know them or you know of them, but you're excited to talk to them because now you're rekindling a conversation you had before, or it's someone in the field that you have heard of, or you have some respect for, and you're excited to get to know them more. Season 3, I think there were 6 or 7 people that I really didn't know in any capacity, and that was really cool. That was really cool to get to know those people, and it was exciting to see that this industry, and kind of like I said earlier, in some ways, like we can get into a rut and we can think we know. For me, I've been in this industry now 20 years, and I think, I've seen it all, I know it all, I know all the people in this industry, or I know of them, and then boom, there's 6 or 7 people on this podcast that I've never really met before, never really heard of, and really enjoyed their episodes and getting to know them more. Okay. It was 3 people go, Hannah. So I have to do my favorite episode. Favorite episode.
It could just be a takeaway and then just hopes for the future. So you don't have to do a favorite episode.
I enjoyed a splash. I'll say this as far as like a favorite. I enjoyed a flash from the past and Coyote. It was so cool to see him. How great is it to see that smiling face after you haven't seen it in so many years? He's the same dude. He's older. If we see him 50 years from now, same dude. He'll just be a little bit grayer. Like he just had so much energy. It was great to be surprised by Trista Taylor, how much fun we had with her episode. And so I really enjoyed some of those types of surprises. And to be honest, it happened in this season, so it wasn't really season specific, but it did. It kind of happened in this season. The meetup,
yeah,
and seeing how many people, because we didn't really have an expectation. I think we all had a thought of what an RPA would be like this year, and our meetup would be like, and the shirts that we were wearing, and kind of just some of the philanthropic impact that we might be able to have on somebody with some of the funds that we're able to raise. That I think all came up higher than we expected. I mean, we hit jackpot on that. Like we put some money into a machine, but we really were happy with what came out in some ways. Like the impact that we had on Maria and how much it seemed to impact her, the amount of people that came out and just enjoyed the fellowship and the socialization at the meetup itself. And then what was really cool about just seeing people in the shirts and how much fun they had wearing them, and that they still sometimes tag us or show us Skinner and all the times that he's a huge fan of ours and everything he continues to, even the AI that he continues to hit us up with. And I'm excited to see where this is going. I wouldn't have guessed all of that would have happened in season 2 or 3. I wouldn't have guessed that I'd have been exposed to 6 or 7 really cool new people that I got to add to my network. And I wouldn't have expected the impact that we've had, that we've got to actually almost tactile see and feel, which is something that impact is tough to measure. And I think we actually have a measurable way in some ways of, even though it's anecdotal in a lot of ways. Hannah has some really cool stats, but it's really cool just to have that palpable feeling of seeing how much what we're doing impacts so many people. So that's really cool. I hope for more of it next year, this season.
Great stuff, guys. And Hannah, thank you for doing this. I'll just add one little teaser for season 4, and that goes back to something that we didn't even talk about just a moment ago, and I don't know why that didn't come up. It should have been close to the top, but we did record our first live audience episode as well in Oklahoma. That was a lot of fun. Jay was on a screen, so I don't know if we've shared this with anybody, but on this episode, you hear it first. The 3 of us are scheduled to be live in front of an audience at another state conference. I guess it's probably okay to say, right? Massachusetts. We are booked to go to Massachusetts, the 3 of us, and do another live in-person or live audience episode, and that's pretty exciting.
We're even going to do a Smartless on the road night. We're all going to bunk up in one room one night just right before we dart out to the airport the next morning.
RecLess.
RecLess.
No, I said Smartless because I said Smartless on the road. Yeah. Reckless on the road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
here comes the
Reckless on the
lawsuits.
Yeah.
Little copywriting.
Edit that out.
Yeah, take that part out. No, I really, really enjoyed wrapping up the season with you guys. I think the number one thing that has happened for me and just listening to you guys is how accessible we have made. We had started off to make Parks and Rec accessible to others, but really and truly how much we've broken down a lot of the walls and a lot of the mystery around being able to participate with other people. And obviously people are responding to it. And it's been really, really cool to see the growth and the interactions that we've had this year with this season, and looking forward to so much more.
Thanks for adding the question part of it. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
No problem. Well, with that, so long to our listeners, so long to season 3, and we can't wait to see you in season 4.
Starting
Thanks
next
for
week, we
listening.
got interviews, right?
That's right. Starting next week. Looking forward to
right.
it. Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Jay, just say
I don't
goodbye.
know. Yeah, Jay was like fucking.
Bye, everybody.